Me, Mike G down in Tampa, and we have Rachelle on, and we wanted to say, what's up, Rachelle?
Hey, good to
Hey,
be here.
all right. So today we're going to tackle the hard thing of artificial intelligence, everything from the movie War Games to touching now iRobot and oh my best one, Lost in Space. That's out right now on I think Netflix. But the thing is, you have been an educator, you have the thrive in education, and you touch on using AI. So just give us a little bit background, because I want to hear how an attorney is now a school teacher, because it was like, whoa, I'm like, that's a lot of school. So let everybody know, what was your journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. Second of all, I wish I was where you are right now because of the weather here today in Pittsburgh, but that's okay. And third, I was a teacher first before an attorney. A lot of people think that I was an attorney and then I got out of that role and went into the classroom, but it was actually the opposite. I do really love school. Like when I was a kid, I always played school. Never really thought I would be a teacher, but I've been in education for a while. I won't say the number of years, but in that time, I have continued to just get different degrees. And when I graduated from Penn State, I was certified to teach in high schools in French, and I could not find a job teaching just French. So I substituted for 3 years, and somebody suggested becoming certified in history, which I was like, yeah, I don't really know about that. But I did decide to pursue Spanish. And so in that time, I had taken some courses in legal translation and business and medical translation and just got an interest in the law, but never really thought about it as a career. And then when I got my job where I've been teaching, I think I had taught maybe 5 years. And in the back of my mind was about law and just wondering, like, I wonder if I would be interested in that. I took the law school test, which you get the scores, you don't know what it means. So I forgot about it for a couple of years. And then finally one day I just decided, you know what, I'm going to apply and see what happens. And in Pittsburgh, we have two universities, but only one of them has an evening program. And I wasn't going to quit teaching. That's not why I did it. But I applied and I got the letter that I was accepted. So I'm like, okay. And I thought I was going to sign up and choose my classes. They're like, no, it's 4 years, 4 nights a week. I'm like, all right, so let's do this. And, I graduated 2006, passed the bar, and in between never got a master's. So I went back and got my master's degree in instructional technology 5 years ago now. And I'm currently working on my doctorate as well. And so
Congratulations.
thanks. It's been an interesting road, but they kind of weave together, and I use all of them. Definitely as an educator, being in the classroom and students asking me questions about the law and analyzing things that happen in the classroom, like evidence is left for things that happen. And you're like, yeah, I don't know. But I often say that, when I originally started teaching, I don't necessarily count that as the beginning of my career, because for my experience or through my experience in law school, had it not been for that, I don't think I'd still be in teaching. So I kind of think I started teaching when I graduated law school because it totally changed me as an educator. I saw what it was like to be as a student again and to struggle. And it just helped me to become more confident and comfortable and like reaching out and connecting with others. And so that's when I started teaching. So it's been a long and interesting, winding kind of journey, but I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet. So,
Well, no joke. I mean, you're getting your PhD. You're like, oh, okay, Dookie Howser, man, just all about school. Hey, so
yeah.
we were talking before the show started, and you're talking about STEM, right? And the
Mhm.
the programs that you work. So I've watched digital education evolve, because I started. I ain't gonna give my age away, but I remember when correspondence was the digital age, and you did it by Pony Express and sending it in the mail, and then we evolved to online, and then we've gone, since COVID kind of forced everybody into this really different platform. We're starting to talk about artificial intelligence, and it's also become a major topic in the government because of how much information it should be shared for PII. But from an educational standpoint, I mean, how are you setting the framework at the school you're at? And what are you doing that's keeping you at
It
that
should be.
edge of being an engineer when it comes down to looking at AI?
Yeah, that's a huge question. But it's one that especially I started to look into AI about probably 4 years ago now. And, in teaching my STEAM course, initially I was teaching students how to code, but then we made a change. And so I was looking at emerging technologies because I was really, as a kid and even as an adult, I loved everything about technology. I was always curious, wanted to have a computer, wanted to do coding, and just fascinated me. And teaching Spanish, as we were talking before, students don't necessarily see the long-term benefits of that. And as a teacher, I mean, whether it's from former students or adults that I encounter at conferences, I so often hear, I had X amount of years of a language and I don't use it or I don't remember it. And so in my classroom, I try to think, what else can I do that's going to prepare them for the future? And so artificial intelligence came into my mind, like, yeah, that's something I should teach in my STEAM course, but also that I should find ways to bring into the Spanish classes too, which enter, all of the translators that are online that my students and all students are out there. I mean, anybody can use those. And so I started to do some research, and you mentioned some of the different movies and things, and in my mind, like things that would pop for me were like Star Wars. I would think of the robots in Star Wars, the movie I, Robot with Will Smith, and there's other things out there. And for my purposes, what I like to do, what I recommend to other educators is just start the conversation with students about, what do you think of when you think of artificial intelligence, or what is AI? And sometimes they want to just Google it and read the definition. I said, well, no, like if somebody asked you, how would you explain it to them? Could you give examples? Could you point out how we're using it in everyday life? And I just start with that framework and build from there. And there's no shortage of apps or platforms or websites or materials that are out there. But I find that the most valuable has been like the conversations that we have in class and just making predictions. Because for me, teaching the students now in that 8th grade course, I think back to when I was in 8th grade and we just started to see the computers, all of these things come in the classroom, and flash forward to now and what we have that we're capable of, like us connecting here or like all around the world and working remotely and getting through all of the past year and 2 years almost of teaching and everything online. Technology is amazing. And I just think it's so important to find ways to bring it in and to let kids develop their own understanding of it, but also explore on their own. And that was a really long answer. So I'm going to pause
No,
right
you're
there,
good. You're good.
right
Yeah,
there.
because we're here to hear it. I think one of the struggles with AI is funding. So I talked to a couple of different professors, and they work with robots. They've worked with different platforms to try to help in education. You watch the commercial, Cisco commercial with the robot going down the hallway at the hospital. So we're evolving as a culture, but I wonder, as an educator, you as an educator, myself as an educator, how are you looking at the future, and how are you trying to shape things to where you kind of get the advanced technology? Because that's where it comes down to the rub, or trying to get your school to, hey, we may need to buy. I'll tell you, the best one is the little planes that everybody flies now with the cameras on them that they use.
Yeah.
What is it called, Mike?
Drones.
Drones. Drones. Yeah, those things. So for schools, I think they're a low budget cost item to work with towards that artificial intelligence field. But what's your thoughts on that, Rachelle?
Yeah, there are a ton of things that are out there, but the nice thing is that I think most schools, I mean, at least in my school district, we have like there's a cohort of schools that are connected. It's run through a branch campus of Penn State, and so they have resources that you can kind of borrow those, even just locally or even nationally. There's a lot of grants that are out there that provide some funding and equipment or resources, whatever it is, for teachers to bring into their classroom. But honestly, there are some really good sites that are out there. Like Microsoft has AI for Good, code.org. You can find a lot of things. There's like a long list where you don't have to invest a lot of money in it, because the one thing, it's nice to have access to that for students to be able to interact with something like to have an Amazon Alexa, or to have a robot, or to fly a drone, or to do whatever the cool tools are. But it's also, the technology changes. I mean, one example, I have 4 Oculus Go headsets and I can't do anything with them right now. So they're all stacked up because the Oculus Quest came out. And so the technology changes. So that's the one thing that one of the things I like to talk about too is, you can't always focus on that specific tool because it may change. And so you have to figure out what is the reason that you're using that, or what is something that students can learn from that or gain from that experience, and always have a backup to every single backup plan. and going to some of those sites where, like Google AI experiments, for example, where students can kind of navigate and they can find something if they're interested in music or if they're interested in art, and they can find something to explore on their own and then share that with everybody else. As far as resources like hands-on materials, being able to get those, I mean, especially now, a lot of things are in demand, and there's a shortage of so many products out there. And having the funding, especially in this past 2 years, where funding that may have originally been dedicated to going to STEAM or STEM resources or bringing in things for AI or AR, VR, had to be reallocated to get to, I can't say it, to get devices into students' hands. So you lost that opportunity. So now you have to make use of what's out there that's free. And with my students, and any students, anybody, even adults, if you want to check it out, go to Google AI and explore what's there. Go to the Microsoft and find what they have as well. Because you can find a lot, and even the government has a whole website. There's AI 4K12. I mean, you name it. There is enough out there that's free to keep you going. And even with ISTE, they have some lesson guides, and you don't necessarily need the device. It's just about like analyzing, what's the process that goes into it? How do people create? How's an algorithm made? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but yeah.
Well, Rachelle, question: what do you see it in 20 years from now? The AI. Do you see it like helping the medical field? Do you see it helping the military with military weaponry, or what I'm saying, in a structure within ourselves? Maybe you have heart disease, and you think you can go in there, like in Star Wars when they had a broken arm, it's just a laser. You're good.
I know.
I'm good, guys. I'm back.
Yeah. Well,
What do you think?
what's interesting is the growth of AI. I mean, just even in the past 2 years, just throwing some examples, like the things that you mentioned, healthcare, military. When the pandemic started, they were using artificial intelligence to do scans of lungs and look at lung X-rays in mass quantities, and it was trained to diagnose and notice if there was like variations that shouldn't have been there, and then it goes to the doctors to kind of analyze it closely and then connect with the patients. All of that, I mean, there's the growth in it, the prediction for the future. They're using it for Alzheimer's research, for drug discovery, for accessibility for students, even in some of the tools that we use. And there were 7 trends that came out in an article I'll say a couple of months ago now. It probably has been maybe closer to like 6 months, but they were looking at the workforce and how it's going to replace people. And that's the biggest concern, is will it replace, for me, a teacher, or will it replace other people in the workforce? And it will. It has in the past. I mean, years ago, 100 years ago, almost at this point, in New York, they had people manually changing the traffic lights. You just stand there and flick the switch. But now we know it's all automated. You don't have to do that. So while those people lost that specific job, they shifted into something else. The use of AI for cybersecurity, for example, the increase in cybercrime over the last 2 years, not surprising because of the number of people that were online for education, for work. And I forget what the percentage is of the increase in, hacks that happened over that time. But now you have this, new field where now we need people, especially with artificial intelligence. It can analyze the traffic in a certain area online. It can recognize patterns that might not be like real people, or they use algorithms to kind of identify something that's like not the normal. And then enter the metaverse, which we don't have enough time to talk about the metaverse. We got that out there. I mean, and then there's even other things like creative artificial intelligence, where you don't need to be somebody who actually writes the book or makes the movie or does the work of art. You can train and put in all of this information in the data that it's analyzed, and then AI can be used to create poetry, music, another painting, for example, video games. Any of those things are possible, and you don't necessarily know that it was created by AI, which I think is the scariest thing about it, because there's a website that you can go through and it'll show pictures, it plays music, it has art, and you're supposed to guess, like, is this AI or not? And it's really interesting to see how well you do, because you look at it, you're like, yeah, that looks like that's a real picture, and it's been created by artificial intelligence. There's a 10 more examples that I could give for you, but the short answer is it is predicted to be, I mean, the growth, I think by 2025, it was going to be, 60% increase in the number of jobs that are going to be available in STEM fields,
Right.
which, artificial intelligence can go into that. It was like 58 million jobs by 2025. So clearly the skills are needed. Clearly there will be some automation. And if anybody wants a good website to go to, it's literally called Will Robots Take My Job?
Oh, will robots take my job? Yeah.
And so check that one out if you're multitasking.
Well, you brought up websites, so let's talk about your website. You got a really dynamic website. I love the term you use, Thrive Education. Thrive for Education. It's really awesome. Oh, Thrive in Education. I stand corrected. I went through it, and you do a really good job of trying to tie in technology and what people are needing to do in the future. And but the funny thing you said when you were talking about jobs is that when you think about it, 30 years ago, coding was a niche for a certain group of people. Now coding's become like the end thing that you need to be able to do. The same with when it comes down to looking at more technology that we're getting. I mean, Amazon AI has a great website. And I was looking at a lot of the stuff that they had earlier today. And then we started looking at the books that you have co-authored and written. And that's a lot. So I'm going to ask you, where do you find the time, girl?
I don't know. Like the number one question I'm often asked is like, do you sleep? And I do, but I have little hacks for things that enable me to work smarter and in less time and still find some balance. Talking about like artificial intelligence and, voice technology and everything, using that a lot of the time helps to save time in writing. And I'm sure when you're writing an email, you see that it has the predictive text that comes out too. So it's like, this is great. How did it know that's exactly what I wanted to say? So you get those emails done like really, really quickly. And you don't have to sit and just type. So I have relied, a lot of my writing has been done by just walking and talking into my phone. So self-care, I can go for a walk in the neighborhood and I can have 2,000 words when I come back and, try to think what I said that sounded like steak and fries or something based on the conversation, because it's good at analyzing our speech, but it's not perfect. So I make use of those types of things, but I do sleep.
So, question: do you think it's going to prolong lifespan? I think so. I just want an outside opinion because it's going to tap into our DNA sooner or later so easily.
So easily,
you know what I'm saying? It's gonna get deep. It's gonna be like oh well, like we see a cold coming on, let's say, or we see diabetes throughout the family gene. So it says, okay, let's break it apart. Bam, then we stopped it. Now this generation not gonna have it. So you think now people are gonna live longer, like 120?
I mean, that's something
Yoda?
that has, that's something that has come up in some of the articles and things that are being posted out there. I mean, if you really want to see what's happening in all those areas that you mentioned, some of like the future of work and the healthcare and military and travel and commerce and everything that we do that's tied in, that does have AI in it. Set up, if you have Gmail, set up alerts. You can set up news alerts and it goes from all around the world. And I mean, depending on how many you set up, you might get like 50 emails all in a row. But what it does is you can put artificial intelligence future, life longevity, for example, and it'll bring in anything that it has found, which the beauty of AI is pulling all that in. Could you imagine having to go back to like the library with the Dewey Decimal System, be like, all right, I want to find artificial intelligence. Okay, where is 4972.3 lowercase j capital B Z? Like, you're not going to find it. I mean, it's great experience, but sorry, I say that to my students in my STEAM class, well, in all of my classes, I'm like, you don't know what it was like. I mean, right now, and that's one thing we do is we'll use Google. We'll sit in class and I say, okay, Google Dewey Decimal System, and it'll get maybe 500,000 results in like a third of a second. And first one's, most often Wikipedia. And I said, okay, now look up artificial intelligence. Then you have like millions, if not billions, in less than a second. Then I'll have them pick something they're studying in class. And then we go through this conversation about like, well, how is that possible? And could you imagine the time that it would take for you? What if I said, I want you to go find 1 billion examples and articles and videos of all of that? So, yeah, but that would be interesting to do. Yeah. I don't know if I'll still be around to see what their results are at that point, because that might take a really long, I mean, less than a second, but there are benefits, but you do bring up a good point, Mike, like that analysis part, being able to read at the time that it saves. I mean, just an example for people who go and have, anybody that's had a diagnostic test done and you're waiting for those results. I know one time I waited for at least 3 weeks for the results of an MRI on my knee. And I mean, not that that was anything, like I kind of knew that I had like a torn meniscus, but it wasn't going to be a surprise. But for other scans that they do, where you're thinking, somebody has bad headaches and they're waiting, and that time is essential. And so being able to feed that into where it can analyze that so quickly. Granted, there's the possibility of mistakes, because at the end of the day, it's a human that programmed the algorithms and fed all that information in. But the time that it saves, so then it recognizes, differentiation and what the like normal pattern is for whatever's being scanned, and then it can, shift that over to the human to then analyze it and look at it. And yeah, there's going to be a time where the AI says, here's a spot on the lung, or here's a lesion on the brain, and then a person will look at that and say, yeah, it's not, because there is that margin of error. But still, it's going to get that response. That time is going to decrease, tremendously compared to what the normal wait time is. And so I think, I don't know about years or how, I can't make any guarantees on that, but that, time can be a huge factor for people that are waiting, depending on the type of test for that, especially when we're talking about healthcare. So, and I'm not an expert. I should have said that first. Like, I'm not an expert. It's just, I read a lot and I'm trying to continue to learn more, but there's so much that's out there. And I think it's fascinating.
Well, you're not an expert, but you're knowledgeable in the whole field because your degrees, your knowledge base, your studies, and stuff like that. You must love it.
I do.
I saw your Google search. I'm like, wow, this is serious. It's a lot of studying. You're a smart one. Yeah. So, there's a question. What about automobiles? Let's leave healthcare. Let's go to automobiles and stuff like that. Because now I notice 5G's coming in. Yeah. And I work downtown. I work downtown Tampa, and I see little poles. And I know 5G is a more faster rate of communication than it is with 4G. So do you think now that's going to lead into, let's say, automatic driving or less accidents and stuff like that? What's your input on that?
Yeah. So we, let's see here, a couple of days, we've been talking, a couple of days ago, we've been in my STEAM class, we've been working more on AR, VR. We did a lot of AI a couple of months ago, but since it's 2022, I started the year with like, here's five big ticket items for the year. And then I asked them, okay, what are your predictions? What is something that you think is going to really like take off when it comes to AI? And most of the students said like autonomous vehicles. And I said, okay, well, who would want that? And they're like, yeah, I would. And there was an article that I read a couple of months ago. Again, it could have been 6 months ago, but the prediction was somewhere like the number of self-driving cars was going to be like over 30 million by the year 2040. Now, granted, that's 18 years away at this point, but that's a lot of cars. And there's a lot that goes into that. And actually here in Pittsburgh, school district Montour, it's near the airport. I think it's probably 4, maybe 5 years ago now. They became, if not the first, the second school to have a middle school curriculum in artificial intelligence. And I got to go to like their ribbon cutting ceremony and visit the students. And they had different groups of students that were working on different aspects. They had robots, and then there was a group that was looking at, self-driving cars and studying ethics and all that goes into the programming of it, where the computer basically has to be able to, analyze, is it a person? Is it an animal? Is it an object? What's the distance? And then weigh decisions. What if you're in the car, driving the car, and you have X amount of passengers in the back, and you have like people and small children, or if it's animals, and, all of the testing that goes into that. So I don't know. I mean, it would be nice, like this week, going back to school after the break, I was a little bit tired in the morning. So having a self-driving car wouldn't have been the worst thing to have available. But I told that to them. I'm like, that would have been kind of nice, because that actually like 30-minute nap in the morning, nice warm and toasty car. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. But you look at movies like The Sixth Sense, where the cars were, I brought up Knight Rider. So the TV show Knight Rider, and I was going to say to them, well, David Hasselhoff. And I thought, there's no way in a million years that these kids are going to know if I say that name. I kid you not. The very next day in class, one of them said, hey, remember that SpongeBob episode with David Hasselhoff? And I went, did you just say David Hasselhoff? I said, yeah. And I go, you know who that is? And they said, yeah. And I went, oh my gosh. And they said, why? And I said, because we were talking about the self-driving cars and I was telling you about Kit, Knight Rider, and all this, like talking to the watch that seems so like, you know, out of the norm and like couldn't do that. It was him. They're like, really? So now I have to pull up a clip. I'm sure they probably pulled it up, but I said, I'll pull up a clip of Knight Rider so you can watch and see what that's like. But it'll be interesting to see, you know, 18
Where we
years from now,
go.
Mike, send me a message or like use your mental telepathy in 18 years to like ask Rachelle, like, let's look at the number of cars. I want to know how many cars are on the road right now that are self-driving.
Remember the time you were on the show? You were right. You were right. Oh my God. Yes, I knew it.
I know. Either that or it's going to be like, there wasn't
We're on
30
10G
million.
now. We're on 10G now.
Oh my gosh. Like, who knows, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
it just started. It's endless. It's
Yeah.
endless because once they start one cube, they learn this one cube, and then they start learning other things that enhances it. Just
Mhm.
like a CPU or motherboard or computers and all this other stuff. It's just the chips now. Now everything's a chip. Pixels have, you know, Google has its own chip, and Apple's doing their own chip, and it's like quantum touch based to another level of another degree of enhancement.
I'm like, I just want a Commodore 64. Can I get a Commodore 64 or an Atari? Like, could I have either one of those? Because I need to
Not
get a new
happening.
Mac, and I'm like, Max One Pro, yeah, like, and you
I
can't
thought
even get a
4K was
computer.
only. I thought it was only 4K. Now there's up to 12K, 20K. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going
know.
on? I can't catch it. Wait, I just bought a 4K.
You guys are a mess. Hey, so the question I got next is education equality. So we understand that infrastructure is going to be an issue. Do you think that as we go forward with AI, will we still run into the problem that we have education inequality in the United States, or, you know, just in general in education, to make sure that everybody's able to have access to artificial intelligence education? And hopefully the last part of that is hopefully they'll come up with some kind of ethical rules on it, because of the way we've been dealing with everything from Twitter and all the other social medias. Will we have some baseline? So the first question is, you know, infrastructure for education equality. Do you think we'll get to that point with AI? Because you got to have money to play with toys, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, a lot of the conversations that I've been involved in or conferences and things that I've attended, that has been at the forefront is the conversation about the equality. And what most people are saying is like with AI and all the capabilities, I mean, at least drawing into, you know, looking at its capability in education is, you know, students being able to have like 24/7 access to learning or personalized learning. And for AI, just as an example, you know, there's some tools that are out there couple of years ago that I had looked at where, you know, students can start, you know, not everybody has the same worksheet, not everybody does the same activity, but there are a couple apps that are out there and tools that are available for free where students can have an activity, and based on the time it takes them to respond, whether they're right or wrong in their answers or anything, like it charts their own personalized path as they go. So that's something that is like, it's great. I mean, for us as teachers, especially last year, well, 2 years ago, remote learning, I mean, we weren't in person. So being able to interact with our students not having devices, that was a huge issue. But whenever we have access to things that now these organizations are creating all of these resources for teachers to access that are free of cost, that definitely helps, because you're right. I mean, the funding is a huge issue. And a couple that I mentioned, and I can even drop them later and we could share them out too. But going to the Google AI and going to like the AI for K-12, or looking at the, you know, the government has, the White House set up this whole department where it has a lot of resources and links for teachers to use that are for free. Grants are out there too, but I think, you know, the biggest thing is just making use of what is already provided through people like Google and Microsoft and Amazon and some other ones that are, you know, they're aware of the need for students, for teachers, for everybody to understand AI and its impact now and in the future, and how we need students to develop the skills, because they're going to be the ones creating whatever it's going to be, that self-driving car for Mike, hopefully sooner than 2040, for example. But I do think, you know, the equality and equity, like those types of things are there. They will always, unfortunately, be an issue. Just as things change, I think that's always going to come up. But I think what has changed is in light of the experience that we've all gone through in the past nearly 2 years now, we've become more aware of that and intentional about like, leaning into or, getting ahead of that and problem solving to find out what we need to do to make sure that like that's not a problem, or if it is, what can we do to kind of work with that to provide more for students and teachers and families and everybody.
Oh, that's awesome, Rachelle. And wait, how does anyone, before we roll out of here, how does anyone get in touch with you? Your website's rocking. Mike throws it. He's been throwing it up as we've been going. But if somebody wants to get in touch with you, they want you to be a guest speaker, they want you to come, and do a video conference with them or Zoom.
Yes.
How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, lots of ways, pretty consistent. So on Twitter, my handle is there on the screen. It's rdene915. Also on Instagram. You can connect with me through my blog, which is the rdene915.com, and my Gmail, same thing. And then also I'm also LinkedIn, any of those ways. I'm happy, again, not the expert, but I have a lot of research and resources and things that I'm happy to share, because I do talk. I'm fortunate that I get to talk about this a lot. And I get to learn a lot from my students, because, they'll ask me questions and I don't necessarily know all the answer. I'll just go, that's a really good question. And I'm going to let you think about that for a little bit. And then I'm like, are they going to come up with the answer first, or am I? And I don't, but then it pushes me to go and find the answer. And that can be uncomfortable as an educator, because you feel like you need to be the expert because you're in the front of the room, but you can't be, because if you're only teaching what you know, then you're limiting the students and their growth potential for the future. So you have to be, and it's good for them to say, like, you don't know. And you get that, like, what do you mean you don't know? I go, I don't know everything. I don't know all the words in English, let alone like these other languages. So it shows them that it's okay to not know. And what do you do when you don't know something? Well, you go look for the answer. You don't necessarily Google it right away, but like you reach out to people, but you use the materials and resources that you have available to you. And hopefully that's a person that you can connect with. And if not, then I guess the tech is going to be there to facilitate it too, through Zoom or
StreamYard. All right, Mike, you got anything before we close out, man?
It's been a great pleasure meeting you. We got to see what happens 10 to 15 years from now. Flying robots, little robots that come massage the feet. I don't know, anything.
I think they have that.
All right. Look. I haven't looked at Amazon in a while. No.
Check out the Amazon Astro. It's a newer robot. I think it's around. I forget the price, but it does a lot. Yeah. It's one of the new trends this year. Yeah.
I'll check it out. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So Rachelle, we appreciate you showing up today and dropping some insight on artificial intelligence and iRobot as we get ready to roll out here. As me and Mike always say, keep it rolling.